Dear friends, hi CPACHungary. We're back again for the 4th time, and you can see now 4 patriots here on the stage of CPACHungary. We are now in the era of global instability and also with the war on Europe's doorsteps. And now what do globalists do? Well, they again unite, but not to defend peace and not to defend prosperity, but to suppress those who dare to stand for national sovereignty. Patriotic leaders and movements across Europe and the United States face growing political, legal, and also financial pressure. How? Whether they are withheld EU funds, whether they are some media smear campaigns, or even politically motivated legal proceedings. The goal is clear: to eliminate patriotic resistance. Mr. Annemans, you come from the heart of EU politics. What experiences do you have concerning suppression on patriotic movements and parties? And what do you think, how can European movements ensure that the European Union is built on the respect of nation states and rather than a supranational control?
Well, my message, if you ask it like that, my message to everyone at our side is the battle is fierce. It's not a rose garden, it's not a walk in the park, it's a fierce battle. You're speaking to someone who already in 1989, a loss for my age, had to suffer from the so-called cordon sanitaire, which was designed in Belgium. All political parties came together, signed a document saying we will never do or never speak and never handle with a Vlaams Belang, Vlaams Blok in those days, because after that they started a fierce battle in courts. The European Union and the globalists use any means to combat us and to harshly go against us. And one of the means, the most important means, is the courts. They abuse and use laws. If necessary, they change them. In Belgium, they changed even the constitution just to be able to bring us in front of courts. And in the end of a procedure that took almost 10 years, the party Vlaams Blok, that was the biggest party of the country 3 weeks later, was banned. We were prohibited. We were declared by the highest courts a criminal organization, so-called because of racism. So we had to found a new party, which immediately became the biggest party of the country. The battle is fierce, but you have to go on. Churchill said it to all of us in another context, but it is very useful. Never give in. Never, never, never. In things great or small, in things large or pity, never, never give in. And that's my message to all of you. Don't underestimate the opponents. They use anything against us.
We have some patriotic friends in Poland who never, never give up. And they are ahead of a very important election this Sunday. So Poland is electing. So I'm turning now to Mr. Kwaśniewski. You know, and we know that the European Union has clearly signaled its preferences, and they have their own means how to influence the political climate in Poland as well. Now that the Tusk government has also taken power in the last few years, there are increasing concerns about violations of legal norms and also constitutional safeguards. From your perspective, how is the principle of national sovereignty being threatened, both by external EU interference and now by domestic actions under the new government?
Yes, Poland since 2023, when the Donald Tusk government took over the power in October, is a stage for a dress rehearsal. We are being victim of a so-called militant democracy, as it is called by Donald Tusk government and Adam Bodnar, Minister of Justice. Not only the militant democracy instrument, but also the so-called transitional justice. While, of course, militant democracy means no democracy is there, and transitional justice means that there is no justice, especially for those under the cordon sanitaire. So the cordon sanitaire in Poland has been already implemented by the European Union before the elections, with European funds being withheld from the Polish government, just like in Hungary.
Yes.
And the Polish voters being victimized and targeted by an intensive propaganda by European Union with European Union efforts just in order to support the liberal coalition. Just after the Liberal coalition took over, a few days later, for the first time after the Marshall State introduced by the communists in the 80s, the broadcasting signal of the public television went down because the public television was violently taken over by the forces of the government. Few days later, the Prosecutor General of Poland office, the National Prosecutor's Office, was taken over by force by the government without consent of the President of the Republic that is required under the Constitution and under the law. 2 months later, Ursula von der Leyen visits Poland and says, I see a rule of law being reintroduced in Poland. I see that rule of law is back and democracy is on track. So the funds, especially the COVID funds, will be back at the disposal of the Polish government. So it is this double standard approach, and it starts with double standards and approach. The European Commission provides double standard basis in the European law and practice of European law, and then they offer their direct support to one of the sides of the political struggle. So it is all about steered democracy, controlled democracy. Of course, afterwards, this new coalition brings in all the tools of the militant democracy, meaning that they are enabled to waive all constitutional guarantees and waive all freedom, basic freedoms, not only freedom of speech, but also political freedom, with full support of the European Union and full support of the international gremias, international committees, just in order to secure that the conservative side will never be back in power. And that is just what we are experiencing now. You mentioned the presidential elections. We have the second round on Sunday. All hell broke loose. We have all the powers of the Europe, all the media of the Europe, attacking the conservative candidate, Karol Nawrocki. We have the German media, we have the international media, all very active in the propaganda against the conservative candidate, while at the same time the government withholds tens of millions of dollars of public funding to Law and Justice Party, public funding that is promised by the law to all political parties in Poland, but withhold only from Law and Justice, against the decisions of the Supreme Court and against the decisions of the bodies responsible for elections, just in order not to allow them for an unequal competition in the elections. Well, what's the solution? The solution is just one way. Do not bow down before them. Do not serve them. We need to be brave, we need to be bold, and we need to provide full protection and bold protection to the elementary Western civilization values, and then our nations will vote for the patriots, and we'll break down the cordon sanitaire, and we will be back in power.
Let it be this way. There is someone from the United States who was brave enough to continue. Yes, clap please, this is very moving. There is someone from the United States who was brave enough to, even after so many legal and also political pressure, he didn't bow down, he stood high, and he won the election. But Donald Trump has actually found himself in a very, very fragmented international climate. And he often emphasizes how diplomacy is important, but diplomacy which is backed by strength. What do you think? How effective can this approach be in this international climate? Also comparing to the European Union politics and how the European Union deals with its diplomacy, and what are the real prospects for achieving peace, lasting peace through such a strategy?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that question, for the panel, and I echo the comments about the importance of staying strong in these types of situations. And I think to President Trump's experience, I think, as you mentioned, he went through this 4 years of darkness and persecution and 90 indictments or however many charges of crimes, kangaroo courts coming against him. This morning, Prime Minister Orbán in his remarks talked about the suffering and kind of connected it to what ultimately could be victory. And I feel like that's a big part of why we take such an example from these Central European countries who lived under the communist bloc, and why does leadership come from places like this? And I think it does go to, you go through those periods of suffering and you come out the other end stronger and more vigilant to defend your rights. And I feel like we take example from the extraordinary leadership of Hungary, dealing with under the boot of the European Parliament, and hopefully we get a good result in Poland, just basically the standing strong there. In terms of the strategic policy that President Trump is engaging in, and you look at the victories that he's had, a victory in the Middle East, victories in basically a kind of dealing with the situation in Yemen and North Korea, and now he's taking that same approach to the Ukraine situation. I feel like what has been missing in foreign policy, and this is in the deep state in Brussels as well as in Foggy Bottom, is there's a belief that everything needs to be taken from a moralist standpoint, that there's good and there's evil, and that we need to just basically agitate. But basically what President Trump is doing is taking a very strong stand in favor of American security interests and peace. And I think he wants to get to a peaceful resolution, and I hope that he can get there, but both sides have to come to the table, and I think he's going to be ready. And as Prime Minister Orban has been leading in this area to try and get to a place where we can have a peaceful resolution. But this is where I think we need to be getting to on the world stage generally, is trying to get to national culture and rights being protected and defended, but also peaceful solutions where we can.
European citizens also want peace, but it seems that leaders of the European Union, they focused more on accelerating Ukraine's accession to the European Union rather than working on peace and de-escalation. From your perspective, Mr. Annemans, why is the European Union pushing forward with enlargement in the middle of the war, especially when it appears that it goes against the core interest of European stability and also competitiveness?
Well, as I explained, don't underestimate that they can and want to use any means that they have. All tools are in the basket, and they use them. And their final goal is, don't forget that, an empire. They want to fund an empire. And the Brexit discussion was about the ever closer union, yes or no. The British said no and went out of it. But there is another aspect, the ever closer and ever bigger union. They want to enlarge it. They want to enlarge the competences, they want to enlarge the territory, they want an empire as big as possible. So the opening up by standing up and voting in favor of the membership of Ukraine of the European Union without asking anyone of the people, without any approval or a referendum, is madness. It's clear and present madness, but they go on with it, as they have always been going on with this empire, the building of this empire. And so we have to be aware that these people are dangerous because they are pushing us in an agenda that is madness. Of course, we are in favor of solidarity with what happens with for the Ukrainian people, because now apparently Russia miscalculated their effort to change the regime. Europe miscalculated the possibility of, with sanctions, etc., to change the regime. And so apparently the victims are the Ukrainian people. So we are behind them, but their solution is not becoming part of this empire. The solution is a less empire or even no empire. We have a cooperation model, and we had that from the beginning. It has been transferred from the Treaty of Maastricht into this empire idea with a president and a national hymn, etc., in that direction, with every time more competences and now more territory. It's madness. We should stop them, and that's why it's urgent that we take over.
Mr. Kwaśniewski, you have mentioned the experience of what Hungarians and Polish people have with EU institutions, and we can see that that there's a growing tendency of how the EU is trying to put even more and more financial pressure on national governments or national parties, and also either through financial pressure or through political messaging. And in your experience, what do you think? How does this trend threaten democratic legitimacy within member states? And what are the lessons that other sovereignist and patriotic parties can learn from the Hungarian and the Polish experience?
You just mentioned this grab on power by European Union after Maastricht. And of course, the only use of this power, of the superstate, as Guy Verhofstadt says, the new growing superstate.
I apologize for Guy Verhofstadt being a Belgian, me too.
Apologies accepted.
There's no reason to
we all know that Guy Verhofstadt presented 267 amendments to the European treaties 2 years ago. And with all those amendments, like amending US Constitution, the European Union is being changed into a single centralized state, with all the power also on budgetary issues taken by the Brussels from the sovereign countries. So if we already experience this double standards method, this modus operandi of putting pressure by budgetary means on independent sovereign countries, just imagine what will happen if Brussels takes over all budgetary issues of European Union.
Allow me to add something. In the European Parliament, we have been voting reports, not only the Verhofstadt report, but also the Bresso-Brok report, where you see that I deliberately reduce the powers of the Council into an advisory body of the Parliament, and that the European fanaticism in the Parliament and in the Commission is brought into power, and the only power.
And the next step, already mentioned in those 267 amendments, is to take over military spending, is to also to take over the command over military forces of Europe. And openly it is presented as a challenge against NATO by the co-authors of the report. And then there will be no more sovereignty, no more nation states, just a single superstate with a capital in Brussels. And then the pressure we are mentioning, the pressure we are fighting back, we are trying to regain our independence, will change into the single government without any level of democratic control, without any level of accountability. So what we are doing now, we are fighting against that, and we are fighting against it also providing program as think tanks from Hungary, from Poland, Matthias Corvinus Collegium, Center of Fundamental Rights, Ordo Iuris Institute, providing programs to European patriots with our reports, for instance, the Great Reset report, with detailed program how to change European Union in order to bring back the cooperation of sovereign states, the flexibility needed in European Union, and also the consent of every country being needed to develop the programs of cooperation.
As you've mentioned, the European Union likes to position itself as an empire, and also there is someone who likes to sparkle in the position of being an empress, who is Ursula von der Leyen. What do you think, from the United States perspective, what way does the European Union has as a whole in today's international climate, and what kind of relations could the United States government have in the last few weeks since Donald Trump is in power with the European Union?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of parts to that question, and that is a lot of the trade policy and so forth obviously flows through the European Union. And I think there's Donald Trump is always looking for a big, beautiful deal, and so there's probably some work to be done there. But I think that there's even more power oftentimes in the relationship with friends, you know, like Hungary and so forth. And so hopefully we'll see some, you know, developments in energy and other sectors that can help there. But you know, going to some of the comments that we've been talking about, just to give a little bit of a white pill or a ray of sunshine here, is that listen to the way American Democrats talk today about the last election, and the inward soul searching that they have, and the way they're talking about. What I think you see is that they now understand that the hubris with which they approached the wokeism and the tyranny and the way they persecuted President Trump and the January 6th and all this stuff that they just manufactured, it backfired on them. And it resulted in a wave election in favor of President Trump. And so my hope, and I think that maybe one way to think about this is that at some point the European voters are going to see what's happening here, and hopefully we'll start to see some of these countries turning around, and hopefully that starts in Poland this weekend.
Thank you. Patriots have to stick together, and Mr. Annemans is coming from the Patriots for Europe group, where European patriots are actually gathered together to have real power in the European Parliament. And what do you think, as someone coming from the heart of EU politics, do you believe that the current institutional mechanisms are systematically designed to suppress sovereign and nation-first voices in the European Parliament?
Well, as I already said, they have designed certain things to compete us or to abolish us, like the Article 7 procedures, and the fact that Hungary is sanctioned with withholding their money, etc. On the other hand, don't forget that they use any mean, not only the ones they designed, but any mean to blackmail our voters and to position them as extremists. That's why they use the words like extremist, far right, etc. It's to scare off the middle voters. They have seen, and then it was the worst of their fears. They have seen that we have reached these center voters, people that want to vote for the golden middle way, peace, prosperity, economic freedom, etc. And they say to these voters, these are extremists. And they use systematically these words and these positioning of us being extreme and far right, just to scare off these people. And we should be aware of that mechanism, because it is the opposite. We are reaching the middle voters, and we are reaching the majority. And they're trying to put us in a corner of the minority, and so it's the opposite of what they say as they act and say we do this for democracy in Poland, in Hungary, etc. It is for the opposite. They try to compete electoral votes. Marine Le Pen, Romania, all actions against democracy. So they use the word democracy to do the opposite, for competing the opposite. And that's their meanness, and that's why I always say don't underestimate them, and our battle should be like their battle, a fierce battle.
We are running out of time, so I would have one more question to Mr. Kwaśniewski, as you are in front of a very important day. What message do you have for the Polish people ahead of Sunday, and what message do you have for patriots across Europe who are ahead of elections, either this year or next year?
We need to stay strong on values. We need to stay strong on sovereignty, on family, on life, and on freedom. And in order to stay strong, we need to vote. We need to go and vote, and we need to elect those who will provide us with opportunity to provide support to our sovereignty and to our nation states.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all. Okay, thank you.
It was a great panel. Thank